We were discussing the various characters that Chaucer has described in his prologue to the Canterbury Tales. We discussed till the sergeant at the law, and now we are going to discuss the franklin or the free tenant. Now, in the previous class, we had discussed about the sergeant at the law. Now, the franklin came along with him. Chaucer says, there was a franklin with him, it appeared, white as a daisy petal was his beard. So our Franklin had a beard which was very white, white as a daisy petal. Now this could also mean that the Franklin is a very old man. A sanguine man, high colored and benign. That is, the Franklin was a man who was very kind. He was a kind and generous man. So Chaucer seems to be presenting Franklin as a kind old man. He loved a morning soap of cake and wine. That is, Franklin, morning soap of cake and wine is simply a term that is used for bread. He would love to have bread with wine every single morning. And then Chaucer says, he lived for pleasure and has always done, for he was Epicurus' very son. So, our Franklin is not simply a kind old wealthy man, he is a person who lived for pleasure. And he was always like that. It's not that for one day he would say he would have a feast and the next day he would eat a normal meal, he would live a normal life. No. Every day for him was a day filled with pleasure. He lived for pleasure only. And so Chaucer says he is Epicurus' very son. Now that doesn't mean that he is actually the son of Epicurus. He led such a luxurious lifestyle. That is just like Epicurus, he was a Greek philosopher. His opinion was that sensual delight was the only true felicity in sight. That is the only means of happiness for a person in life. And this was exactly the philosophy that our Franklin followed in his life too. As noted as Saint Julian was for bounty, he made his household free to all the county. Now, Saint Julian is the patron saint of hospitality. Now, the same way, our Franklin is also known for his generosity. All were just always welcomed to his house. His bread, his ale were finest of the fine, and no one had a better stock of wine. So, Chaucer talks about the food he has at home. He has the best bread, the best ale, the best of wine. He had the best of everything, the finest of its kind. His house was never short of baked meat pies, of fish and flesh, and these in such supplies it positively snowed with meat and drink. So always there was the best food, the best meat pies, and in such large amounts that it seemed to others that it was snowing meat and drinks in the Franklin's house. So he could be a good man. He has enough, plenty, not enough, but plenty of food, and he is also very hospitable. He always keeps his table ready for the guests. In the following lines, again, we have the description of the food. According to the seasons of the year, changes of dish were ordered to appear. He kept fat partridges in coops beyond, many a bream and pike were in his pond. Now imagine the kind of luxury he enjoyed. He would ask his chefs, his cooks, to make dishes which would suit the season. And he had birds and he had fishes, so whenever they needed meat, it would be taken straight fresh from his house itself. Woe to the cook, unless the sauce was hot and sharp, or if he wasn't on the spot. Now, the cook could never complain that he did not have fresh ingredients. He has everything he needs there in the Franklin's house. He simply has to create the essence and flavor in the dishes. And in his hall, a table stood arrayed and ready all day long with places laid. Now he had a table, Franklin had a table in the hall which was ready all day long. No matter which time of the day you're going into the hall, you will always find the table ready with dishes to eat. Now, did you notice that from the beginning of the description of Franklin to where we have reached now, all what Chaucer has told about Franklin's description is that he has a white beard, and we know that he is a kind man. And from there on, Whatever Chaucer has told is all about food. This character of Franklin, he is described exclusively in terms of the food that he eats. So, from the description of the food, we understand that he is wealthy. He is a very wealthy landowner. Moving forward, as justice at the sessions none stood higher, he often had been member of the shire. A dagger and a little purse of silk hung at his girdle, white as morning milk. As sheriff, he checked audit every entry. He was a model among landed gentry. From these lines, we understand that Franklin has worked as justice at the session, that is, the advisor in the parliamentary sessions, and he has also been a member for the shire, maybe a knight of the shire, and he was also a sheriff. He checked the taxes. So, not only is he wealthy, he is also experienced. Especially if you have to be an advisor in the parliament, you have to be very wise. He might be old and he might be also wise. And all this makes him a good citizen. He doesn't seem to be corrupt. Like the other characters whom we have met, Franklin doesn't seem to have any bad traits to him. He seems to be a good citizen according to Chaucer. Now, this is a picture of Franklin. One thing that I forgot to add about him is that Chaucer says Franklin had a belt, he had a girdle, and on the girdle he had a small silk purse. The purse was also white. It was as white as morning milk. He also had a dagger, a small knife. Next, we are introduced not to a single person but a group of people. We have the guildsmen. So there are five people here in the guildsmen group: the haberdasher, dyer, carpenter, weaver, and carpet maker. In 14th century England, there were many guilds, Guilds. Now, guild is simply a group of people, and these people usually do professions which are kind of similar. Now, here you have the weaver, the dyer, the tapestry maker, and all, which are all kind of similar professions. They stay together so that their trade can flourish, and also when they are together, they can protect each other. They are stronger that way. When they are individually standing, maybe they are not that strong. When they come together, they are strong as a group. It's more like today's trade unions. And another power that they enjoy, they have a kind of political power. When you come together as a group, you're a strong group, you also have a political power and influence, a position. So they are also powerful, they also have some special privileges. Okay, that was just some background information about the guilds and the guildsmen of the 14th century. Now moving into the poem again, Chaucer says, a haberdasher, a dyer, a carpenter, a weaver, and a carpet maker were among our ranks, all in the livery of one impressive guild fraternity. Now, you find all these people coming together into the inn, Tabard Inn, and they are all in a uniform. They are all in the livery of one impressive guild. They have worn the uniform of the same guild. They are all from the same group. Of they all share a kind of brotherhood. Now, just to go deeper into these lines, you see, Chaucer's description about various people, characters in the prologue, is all mostly dependent on their physical appearance. So, the physical appearance of these guildsmen cannot be just left out thinking it's not important. You see, they have come in their uniform. These people have come to the Tabard Inn so that they can continue their journey for the pilgrimage. Now, why would they come with their uniform? Why would they come and show that they belong to a particular guild? We feel that they are intentionally trying to show what their occupation is. See, remember when Chaucer said that they come from an impressive guild. Their guild is very popular, it's very prestigious. So, to show that they belong into that guild, it seems a little pretentious. Now imagine a scenario where you and your friends, you are simply there out in one of the famous tourist places to have fun. And you find a group of people coming to the same place. They are also having fun, but maybe they are all wearing the doctor's coat and the stethoscope. They don't have any use for these things in that particular place. And the only reason that they might have wanted is just to show others that we belong in this particular profession, we are very prestigious. You better understand that we come from a very prestigious occupation. It was kind of the same thing that happened here. Chaucer felt that the guildsmen were kind of showing off. They were so trim and fresh, their gear would pass for new. Their knives were not tricked out with brass but wrought with purest silver, which avouches a like display on girdles and on pouches. So their appearance was neat, trim, and fresh. They also had tools that looked new. It was not like they were very poor people who were struggling to make a living. They were quite wealthy. They were wealthy enough to dress up well and to show that prestigious guild that they are coming from. Moving on, each seemed a worthy burgess fit to grace a guild hall with a seat upon the dais. Now they looked very worthy to be seated on the dais. Their wisdom would have justified a plan to make each one of them an alderman. They had enough wisdom to make them the town councillor. They had the capital and revenue. Besides, their wives declared it was their due. Now, Chaucer is not only talking to us about these guildsmen, he's also telling us about the wives of these guildsmen. The wives thought that they had to be called madams, and they went to church, and they did not go to church because they had immense faith in God, but they went because going to church was to be seen. They wanted others to see that they are going to the church. And they also wanted their mantle to be carried like a queen. Mantle is the extra length of the dress that flows when you walk. So there would be some people who carry the dress for you when you walk, especially for the queen. So they wanted their mantle to be carried just as how it would be carried for a queen. So you find both the guildsmen and their wives, they are both concerned with appearances. The reason why the guildsmen wear their uniforms and the reason why the wives go to the church, it's all the same. They think that they have this air of authority, that they are very stately, that they deserve to occupy some higher positions. So, here in a way, Chaucer is satirizing these people, criticizing these people. See, they are members of the working class, but they are dressed as noble people, as nobility. So, Chaucer speaks ironically and describes them as being worthy, wealthy, enough to hold different high positions in the society. But on the positive side, you can also consider Chaucer to be talking about the people of the working class gaining power and money. They are upwardly mobile. They are moving into the higher sections of the society, which is kind of good. Now, the next person that we meet is a cook. Now, this cook came along with the guildsmen to cook for them. So they had a cook with them who stood alone for boiling chicken with a marrow bone, sharp flavoring powder, and a spice for savor. He could distinguish London ale by flavor, and he could roast and seethe the broil and fry, make good thick soup, and bake a tasty pie. Now there is so much of praise going on for the cook. He knows many good recipes, he has good cooking techniques, so he this is what he does, and if he can do that, he is a good person, he is a good character. But then Chaucer moves into something that is more important. But what a pity, so it seemed to me, that he should have an ulcer on his knee. Now, the cook is just a perfect cook, except for the fact that he had a giant open sore on his leg. Now, whatever goodness we have heard about his cooking, it all just goes away when we hear this one line about him, that the person who cooks food for you has a giant open sore on his leg. It's kind of disgusting. His story started very well, that he is excellent in what he does, but then suddenly it turns so disgusting. So, and this is also the only description that we have about this person. Throughout the line, we only heard about his cooking, his skills, and then the only description we get about this person is like this. And then there is something even more weirder coming up in the next lines. The last line, as for the blancmange, he made it with the best. Blancmange is a dessert like a pudding. It is white in color. Here, the narrator juxtaposes the description of the sore on the leg to this dessert that the cook makes. A bit weird, right? Now, why would Chaucer focus on the ulcer on the knee when he could have simply talked about the talent of the person? Now, here, Chaucer is questioning the hygiene of the cook. Now, usually, even now in today's world, we eat food from outside. For us, what matters is how good the food would taste. We are not concerned about the hygiene places where the food is cooked or the hygiene of the person who cooks the food. So, here Chaucer is telling us about the food that he cooks. The food is perfect, it's just beautifully cooked. But what about the question whether it's healthy or not, whether it's good for you or not? This is what Chaucer is trying to focus on. The next character that we get to meet in the prologue is the skipper or the shipman. There was a skipper hailing from far west. He came from Dartmouth, so I understood. From the description, we understand that the shipman is not a wealthy person. He rode a farmer's horse as best as he could. He did not have a stout horse like the knight or the squire. He had a very normal horse. He had a farmer's horse and he rode his horse the best possible way he could. And he wore a woolen gown that reached his knee. His clothing was also very coarse. He wore coarse clothes. A very important feature of this man's physical appearance is that he had a dagger. Dagger is a knife, a small knife. A dagger on a lanyard falling free hung from his neck under his arm and down. So, on his neck, he had a kind of a necklace, and on that, he had hung a knife, a dagger. And it shows that he's a fighter. He's not simply a normal man who is frightened of the other people. He's not frightened of fights. He is a fighter. The summer heat had tanned his color brown. So, because of the heat, his skin is brown in color. And certainly, he was an excellent fellow. Now, when Chaucer says he's an excellent fellow, you can look at him. He's not a wealthy person. He's riding a simple horse and he's doing his best. He's a fighter. He has this dagger. The tanned skin shows that he's not a lazy person. He has been out in the sun. He has worked hard. He had much vintage wine with him, both red and yellow. Many a draught of vintage, red and yellow, he would drawn at Bordeaux while the traders note. So, one thing, the first thing, in fact, actually, the first negative point that we come to know about him is that he steals. He steals wine from traders as they sleep. And from the next lines, we understand that he is not a person with moral principles. The nicer rules of conscience he ignored. He doesn't give importance to good and bad. If, when he fought, the enemy vessel sank, he sent his prisoners home, they walked the plank. So, even when he fights on the sea and the enemy vessel somehow he is able to fight and win, the prisoners are sent home, meaning they are made to walk on the plant and jump into the sea, and they will die on the sea, obviously. So, we clearly understand that he is not a very kind person. As for his skill in reckoning his tides, currents, and many other risks besides moons, harbors, pilots, he had such dispatch that none from Hull to Carthage was his match. And then Chaucer talks about the skill, the professional expertise of our shipman. He was very good at what he does, that he knew everything about the sea. There was nobody from Hull to Carthage that could be better than him. So, even though Chaucer criticized some of the negative qualities that our skipper or the shipman has, he also admires the skill of this person. And Chaucer continues saying, hardy he was, prudent in undertaking. His beard in many a tempest had its shaking, and he knew all the heavens as they were, from Gotland to the Cape of Finisterre, and every creek in Brittany and Spain. So Chaucer says he has seen many battles, many a tempest. He knew all the ports. From Gotland to Cape of Finisterre is simply almost all the important ports of Europe at that time. So he knew every important details of his profession. He was very good at what he did, and he was also experienced. And the barge, the boat he owned, was called the Maudlin. So that's all about the shipman, who could maybe also be a pirate. We do not know. So we have discussed few characters in today's video. We have seen some details about Franklin, the guildsmen, the cook, and the skipper or the shipman.